Lennon and Yoko Ono. So the band The Beatles broke up in 1969 due to disagreements about business and management and especially money. Each member then went on to have their own solo career. So just as a sidebar here, we covered the Beatles at the start of the British invasion, which was several weeks ago for us, but actually they only arrived in the United States in 1964. What this means is most of their oeuvre, as we know here in the United States, occurred over the span of a mere 5 years. So the Beatles were very prolific, but also in the span of overall rock history, or bands such as the Rolling Stones, which went on to produce album after album, the Beatles' output is actually pretty limited in just terms of the timeline. So each Beatles member went on to have their own solo career, as did John Lennon. John Lennon was known as being the more contemplative, intellectual of the Beatles, and he went on to have a career primarily involved in protest music. John Lennon and Yoko Ono had met prior to the breaking up of the Beatles, and they got married on March 20th of 1969 in Gibraltar, near Spain. They then had a week-long, very public honeymoon as a bed-in protest for peace held in Amsterdam. This related to the Vietnam War, but also just all sorts of social issues worldwide. In 1971, the two produced the song Imagine, which became a hymn for peace. Now, this song was inspired by Yoko Ono's poem Cloud Peace in her collection Grapefruit. In later years, John Lennon admitted that the lyric form, imagine this, imagine that, as well as the concept of envisioning a world that was free of conflict, came from this poem of Yoko Ono's. However, he omitted giving her credit at the time. Now, Imagine is known for its simple melody and chords, just a light, piano-led reiterating of chords, oscillating between two chords, and a melody that's very simple to remember and sing. It's piano-led, and in that way it has some influences from a folk style, and this is to help direct the listener's focus purely to the words. Another song that is of Vietnam War protest subject matter is Happy Xmas, War is Over. This one also utilizes pretty simplified musical parameters, as well as a children's chorus to give sort of a sense of universality and perhaps innocence. Next up is Jimi Hendrix, who is one of the most skilled and influential electric guitarists in history. The main comparison that we know so far would be to Chuck Berry, but honestly, Jimi Hendrix might even be more skilled and influential than Chuck Berry. Now, Hendrix cultivated both white and black audiences in his playing. However, he found that he was never fully accepted by either, a theme that will be further explored in one of the articles this week. Now, as we read from Jack Hamilton's article, Jimi Hendrix is often considered an exception in rock music history as a black rock star. But this is due to color erasure, or the wiping away of influential black musicians and black musical traditions and styles from the history. And so only because of color erasure can Jimi Hendrix's placement, for example, in the Woodstock Music Festival, seem exceptional. In reality, he comes from a long line of black musicians, especially blues musicians and rhythm and blues musicians, that have influenced the development of rock and roll. Now, as I mentioned, Jimi Hendrix is known for performing at the Woodstock Festival in 1969. He performed a striking instrumental rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner, the national anthem, at 9 a.m. in the morning after a full night of playing. So at that point, 93% of the attendees had left the festival. However, for the 7% who stayed, Jimi Hendrix's performance of the national anthem became seared into their memory as one of the most memorable events from the festival. Now, Jimi Hendrix's performance was tacitly understood as being subversive protest of the Vietnam War in particular. So while playing the song and tracking along with the lyrics, there were certain parts, such as the rocket's red glare, when Jimi Hendrix would veer off away from the main melody and go into a searing string of electric guitar effects. And these sounds would represent the sounds of screaming jet planes, bombs falling, screams from bystanders. And in this way, the performance was interpreted as a critique or a subversion of pure patriotism. Jimi Hendrix also quoted Taps, the military funeral song, which was taken to be a reference to how many American soldiers had died in the Vietnam War. Now, much like the Woodstock Music Festival itself, Jimi Hendrix didn't set out here in this performance for the purpose of protesting Vietnam or critiquing the United States, but it was very much just in the milieu of culture at the time. So therefore, it was tacitly understood to have those subversive overtones, even without the direct comment or challenge. Now, many people have the misconception that this performance of Jimi Hendrix's was either completely improvised or debuted at the Woodstock Music Festival, but this is not true. Hendrix had previously played this arrangement of the national anthem on other concerts and other sets, and on those sets he titled it This is America, which I think speaks more to his perhaps tacit subversive intent in this performance. You might also notice there's some legacy here, as there's a song now by Donald Glover called This is America that has become quite well known today.